Ladies and gentlemen, come gather round, come gather round, come gather around. Today, we're going to be fixing rust. What rust? Oh, this rust. So this is my wife's Hyundai Accent. It's a 2008. We paid $1,300 for it. Cranks doesn't start. Someone had forgotten to change the timing belt and it bent all the valves, so we got it cheap and I fixed it. But with everything that's cheap, there's always a cost, a price, and a hidden thing. Although this hidden thing is rust, and I freaking hate rust. I hate bodywork more than life itself, but I hate rust more. So I'm going to try and fix it. I took a piece of masking paper and made my little template there to find out where the little edge reveal kind of thing is. This is a quick way of skewering your wrist with snips and things, so be careful. I want to get one of them electric Makita nibblers. That should be fun. Using a tipping die and a skateboard wheel on my bead roller to get an edge happening on there, because you can't exactly put a curved fold on using a sheet metal brake. So tipping die works good. I'm going to try my hand at using 3M panel bond, panel adhesive, Corvette panel adhesive, whatever. These modern cars, lightweight cars like this, are super thin metal, and it's a little dicey on welding. Plus, if you can't properly deal with the back side of the weld, that burnt and exposed metal from welding is going to come back and rust your panel out for you again. Looky here. In the back corner of this car, there's a metric ton of Bondo in there. Somebody stoved into the back of this car, and I think they call this cave and pave. They've just filled it all in. I once had a student years ago. I had a vehicle I was working on, a 77 Chevy pickup, and I bought a bed, used, short bed from somebody local. There were cracks in the quarter panels and the bed sides, and I gave a kid an abrasive disc and said, chase these cracks and see how far they go. And then we bought like a Florida-sized can of Bondo and just put the plastic all back in because ain't no fixing that. This was interesting. Anyways, I made my pattern, made the wheel arch, used the shrinker and stretcher if I shrank it too far to try and get the right curve. You can kind of see the scrunch parts around the angled part of that panel. Currently, I'm refabricating the little piece there that you see that it screws the leading edges of the bumpers into the fender edge. The ones on there are pretty thin, and I just wanted to use some thicker metal, make it last a little, or rust through a little slower. So once you get the wheel arch figured out on this, then I'm going to fabricate the inner wheel as well. This, in my case, because I'm using panel adhesive, I'm not going to be using like a proper rolled fender bead, fender edge, wheel edge. I'm doing something, I'm just gluing them and calling it good. This is an inexpensive car. The inner wheel well of this has some unusual shapes, which took a bunch of beating and hitting and smacking, and I've got a little 4x4 piece of wood on the floor there with a bowl cut out of it using a flap wheel on an angle grinder, so I could try shrinking and shaping the metal with a block of wood. A skill learned from my old blacksmithing days. But I'm trying to make the inside. The inside doesn't have to be pretty, but I want it to fit well enough that it seals. Now, things you need to know. In some cases, panel bond is an acceptable repair by the manufacturer, and some parts of a vehicle are structural, and you want to be kind of fussy, and others are not. Wheel arches on a unibody like this are structural. You shouldn't be messing with this. However, this was rusted out, which is certainly less structural. I would argue I'm making it more structural than the rusted out pieces were. The inner and outer wheel arches were gone. So I think I'm going to be okay. So whatever, it'll work. I used number 5 screws left over from when I built some wooden cabinets. You drill the holes so that the screw bites into the underside piece, and then it's free fitting through the outer piece. Here's another rust patch that I'm making for the bottom of the back of the rocker panel. This does not fit as well as I'd like it to, but it's going to be fine. I mean, if you're going to crawl down on your hands and knees and look at the underside of a Hyundai Accent, you need to reevaluate your life priorities. I did weld an 1/8 inch welding rod to the edge, the trailing edge of this patch. You'll see it in a moment, just to try to recreate the fender edge on it. In the back there, in that case, I used silicon bronze TIG weldings just to keep the heat down. Makes it sort of look like a rolled edge. And then this is a square hole that holds this kind of forward mud flap thingy on the bottom of the car. I'm trying my best to make these fit as perfectly as they can so that it doesn't, by attaching it, it doesn't distort the panel or anything weird. Here's some inner structure that you can see I've had to grind down, and I'll be making a wee patch for that as well. This is the thing with rust. You say, oh no, it's just got surface rust. There's no such thing as surface rust. You don't find rust. Rust finds you. And it's kind of like cancer. And they call it cancer because you open it up and go, well, let's put this on Marketplace and see how much we can get for it. However, I do enjoy the car, and I'm absolutely giggly that my wife and I have matching his and hers red Hyundai Accent hatchbacks. They're cool. They're not cool, but they're cool. So this is another patch. The blue sheet metal I'm using is actually roof of a Corolla GTS that I cut up to build a Lotus Super 7 replica. Oh, the horror. Yeah, I know. Corolla, an AE86 Corolla GTS. I drove it home and cut it up. But we do what we do because we do it. Should I have saved the Corolla? It doesn't matter. The 7 was a lot more fun. So in this, I'm holding it together with screws from the inside, but when I went to actually assemble that inner panel, I decided to use pop rivets. Pop rivets are not the most watertight. Screws are a bit better. So for the outsides of these, I made sure the screws got panel adhesive on them and then over top of them so that they're as sealed as possible. At some point, you'll see me going over the holes again with a drill, and I'm just countersinking the holes a little bit so that these flathead screws, or countersunk screws, whatever they're called, wood screws, will kind of be stuck into the metal. So when I grind the heads down to hide it under some kitty hair, there's still some screw holding it all together. So here we're applying the 3M panel bond, and the instructions are to smear it on both pieces and then put a big fatty bead on one of them and then screw it together. And I put a plethora of screws in till I thought that's probably enough to hold it. And in some cases, like the bottom of this patch and around the wheel arch of the other one, I use clamps. And I let it sit. You can get different working times. I bought the 4-hour cure so that I had reasonable amount of forgiveness in making this work for me. So and I let it sit all day. But you can get this stuff to set up pretty fast if you know what you're doing and you don't make mistakes. I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm going to make some mistakes. So goop it all up, clamp it all up, seal it all up. And then in theory, while this needs to be glued metal to metal, like bare metal on bare metal, it's sealed with this adhesive, so it shouldn't hold any moisture if it fits right and it's gooped thick. No moisture should get in and re-rust this thing out. Typically, when I've done cheesy body repair in the past, any rust repair will last about a year. So I'm hoping this lasts longer. So made sure it was sealed, and then once it had cured for a day, I went over and sanded it all. And I think I'm using a 60 grit, except it wasn't quite as abrasive on the screw heads, so I went with a little 60 on a 2-inch roll disc, roll lock, whatever they are. Then 60 on a DA. I've got a really aggressive one somewhere, but I think I broke the pad on it. At some point during the repair, I actually drove over both of my 6-inch DA sanders. So that was exciting. I wasn't paying attention. Anyways, once it's cured, and then you kind of rough the shape into place with like a 60 grit or something, then you're going to mix up the kitty hair, which is this. It's a fiberglass reinforced short strand body filler. I think it's short strand. It's basically filler with fiberglass in it, which is waterproof, kind of pseudo-structural, just because the glass gives it some strength. So I'm just being pretty liberal with this, and wear a mask for the love of mercy. It's fiberglass. You don't want that in your lungs. And I'm just trying to get it pretty close. I'm not a body man. I hate body work. I'm not good at it. I don't enjoy it. I do have a bunch of body tools. And this, I was just there for a moment using a straight line sander, board sander, to get that straight edge. So with the kitty hair cured and sanded into shape, then I'm masking this off, spraying it with, I did 3 coats of epoxy primer and let that sit for a day. The epoxy should seal everything fairly well, and I sprayed it inside and out, and I used seam sealer on the inside later on just for an extra little bit of please don't absorb water and rust out. So I do like epoxy primer. It kind of has an apocalyptic fruit smell. And in this case, I'm not trying to get it perfect. I'm just finding out where I am with low spots and high spots and how bad it is, and just try to get it smooth, sanding it with probably, I don't know, 60 or 180. And then I'm going to put something on there. Slick sand. Slick sand is one of the 7 wonders of the universe. If I had known about slick sand when I was starting to learn auto body, I probably would hate it a lot less. Ideally, you put a skim coat of filler all over everything, but it's hard to get all of your coats, if you have to do more than one, a consistent kind of hardness, because you never really mix it all the same. But slick sand is so uniform and so consistent, and it sands so nice that, oh my gosh, slick sand is the way to go. I used a cheap Princess Auto spray gun that had a 2.3 millimeter tip, so it's like a frickin' fire hose of filler. But it's a wonderful way of building up the surface quick. Then I'm using a paint stick with 180 grit sandpaper, and then I'll move up to 220 and then 320. Or maybe it's 240, but whatever. Kind of up in stages. You sand the slick sand until the epoxy shows up. And then you know, if you have to, you add some more slick sand or just stop sanding. In this case, I don't care enough to make this perfect, and my skills are not that good. So once you're happy with the finish, again, I did about 2 or 3 coats of epoxy primer. Looks like 3 coats. And I'll let that sit for a day as well. And then the next day, I scuff it all up. I think I did a sealer coat in here, which is just a slightly thinned epoxy primer. But I'm sanding it and scuffing it, and this is probably 220 or 240, 320, and I think I went up to 400 or maybe 320. I don't know. I don't know if it all that matters. Probably 400. And then I spray it with base, and it'll be a base clear to match the original. I think the base might be a lacquer. I don't know. I wasn't huffing the fumes. This is Hip Hop Red. So here's how it looks as it's still drying with my horrific bodywork skills. I'm going to try and roll some tape edge so it's kind of a rounded edge of about 1 inch on the top, because I want to kind of blend the new clear coat into the old clear coat to save myself having to paint the whole panel. The car is just not worth this kind of love. Not even this kind of love. A normal person would just leave the rust and let it go. So I'm rolling the edge of the tape up and then putting down the color. Not the color, the clear. I am using Shopline. I think it's from PPG. I get it from my local auto parts place called Lordco. So the 3 coats of clear, and I sprayed the top spoiler thing because the clear had peeled off of that. Apparently, clear really needs to be put down on top of fresh base. So I scuffed it and I put base on that and then clear over top. So who knows? But this is what it looks like. We're far enough away that you can't see my horrific runs and defects unless you've got like high definition and you can stare at them. So stare away, further away. But we're putting it all back together, fitting the screws, replacing some burnt out light bulbs, and getting it all back together.
So there it is in all its glory. Would I do this again? Probably. One of the things that's nice about not having to weld it is I'm not going to shrink the whole stupid panel, and I can't get my hands in there to dolly it out and plenish it, so the glue is a good way to go. You have to make sure the patch panel fits really well, or when you rivet it or screw it together, it's going to warp your panel, and then God help you. But there it is. The paint's not perfect. I'm not a painter. I'm not a body man. I freaking hate body work. But I hate rust more. So that's taking care of that. So we'll check back in a year or two and see how well this holds up over time. But that's less offensive than it was before. I know some of you guys are like, oh, look, you should have painted the whole thing. Every single panel on that car has a defect of some kind. So whatever. I paid $1,300 for the car. It's going to be okay. Canadians, that's like $50 US. As always, thanks for watching. Take care, and we'll see you again.